All right, well, hey there, and welcome to part 4. This is going to be we're going to be doing quite a bit in this section. Actually, we're going to be working with the fire and just bringing everything together and making it really awesome. So the first thing we're going to do, let's just go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to hit Command G on that, and we'll just call this finish. Let's grab a adjustment layer. I really want this fire to kind of like show a little bit more color and just be a little bit more vibrant. It's a little bit plain right now. So I'm going to grab an adjustment layer. I'm going to go up here to curves. And then let's go to our red channel. I'm going to click right here and just drag up, which just puts a bit of the like red area. It just makes it a little bit more red, just like that. Okay, very cool. Now let's hit Command I on that layer mask, and then here with like a very soft round brush, I'll actually include this brush in the tutorial itself. What we're going to do is I'm just going to paint white on our layer mask, and it's just like going to kind of bring this area in. Let's choose an even larger brush. There we go. And just, kind of like bring in a couple areas like this. There we go. It just kind of like makes it look like there's actually a glow coming from the fire like that. Let's do it again, like a little bit more enhanced. So I'm going to do a curves adjustment layer. I usually do this sort of thing in a couple different stages. Like it's not uncommon for me to make like 5 or 6 curves adjustment layers. I like to, I guess. There we go. Let's bring this in and bring up the yellow points as well. All right, that looks good. I'm gonna hit Command I on there, and then we'll just make this a little bit smaller, and then this will be like for closer to the fire. Just like a little bit more of a glow. Cool. Okay, so we can see, let's just make that go that way. We can see already we're getting like a little bit more color from the fire. So this is the sort of thing that a lot of people, I think, skip over these couple steps that really, really make a big difference. So the one, couple things that I'd like you guys to take out of this is don't skip over these steps, because they really do wind up making quite a big difference. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we're actually going to create a custom brush, and what we're going to do with that is like create a little bit more of this fire. Let's one more curve adjustment layer. How many times in my life have I said curves adjustment layer? I don't know. I just say it so fast now. Curve adjustment layer. Let's just do one more and just bring in some red. Just like really bring some heat right here into the fire. And this can be done at any point in time. Like it's not important that I'm doing it right now. I could do it later as well. I'm just trying to keep it together. There we go. All right. Yeah, that looks really good. So nice glow on that fire. So to create this custom brush, let's hit F a couple times, get that on its own. I'm going to hit Command N to create a new document, and we're going to make it 500 pixels by 500 pixels and hit OK. So it's going to look exactly like this. Hit F to full screen this again. So on a new layer here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint with black, and this is going to be stuff that's like coming from the fire. So I'm thinking, like little things like this. This is like going to be like ash and whatnot, right? Coming off the fire. So, just something that looks like relatively organic, like little particles or whatever floating. Okay, that looks good. Something like that. Totally fine. Let's just erase half of this thing away. Okay, and what we're going to do now, so this is going to be like dust or particles or whatever. I'm going to go to Edit, and then down here Define Brush Preset. And we'll just call this Ash 1. Okay, now let's switch to our other document here. Hit F to go back, and I'm going to create a new layer on here. Let's just there we go. Let's bring that in there, and on this new layer, let's go ahead and group all those things together. Call this color. There we go, because that colored our image. Okay, on this layer, we're going to hit B for the brush tool. I'm going to right click and go all the way down to the very last brush that we have, and that's going to be this ash brush. So painting with white, that's basically what it looks like if I paint with white on this layer. So we actually need to still do some things that's going to help just a little bit help this brush out really come to life. What I'm going to do is go to Window and then down here to Brush. Now all these different options will give us different types of brushes, but right now that's about what we're painting. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to click on Shape Dynamics, and I'm going to turn my size jitter on all the way up and the minimum diameter down. That's just going to make some of these like larger and some of these are smaller. There we go. So you can kind of see from this that it's already looking quite a bit different. Let's go ahead and delete those. I'm going to bring on my angle jitter all the way up as well. And now it's going to be really random because they're going to be completely just like scattering around as I paint. There we go. That looks pretty cool there too. Now let's click on our scattering. We can bring our count down a little bit, and we'll just bring our scattering up. And now as I paint around, you can see it just kind of really like makes sparkles and specks and what looks like, you know, dust or ash or smoke or whatever have you. But it's a very, very cool thing to do. If you want more, just bring your count up and you'll be putting quite a bit more down as you paint around. There we go. Just keep in mind, the more you turn your count up, the harder your computer has to work. So if you have a computer that's a little bit older, bring your count down and just like do it more. There we go. By do it more, I mean click or use your tablet. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now that this brush is already created, that's about what we want. I'm going to click right here and go to new brush preset, and we're just going to call this Ash Final and hit OK. So that's going to be the Ash brush. So we can right click and go all the way down here, and this is going to be the Ash Final brush. Now, if you want to get rid of one of these things, like this is the Ash brush without all this stuff in there, right? And then I'll right click and go to the Ash Final. You can see what a big difference that makes, right? If you want to get rid of the original Ash brush, hold Alt or Option and click right here. If you hold Alt or Option, your scissors will come up and you can click on it, and then now it's gone away. So it will not like bloat up your little menu here, whatever. All right, and usually brushes that I use most often, I'll bring those up to the top, and you can do that by going to Window and then going down to Brush Presets, and then you can click over here and go to Preset Manager, and then I can move these now. So I can move that one. So this is my Ash brush here. I can move that, and now if I right click, it's going to be right here instead of it was right down there. All right, cool. So now I'm going to grab this, you know, color like that and just start painting around there with my Ash brush. You know, it's like particles that, like, you know, fire and stuff like that. So all I'm doing is like grabbing these colors and kind of like painting around, you know, not only white, I'm using some of the other colors as well. We'll make some like lighter, there we go. And you can make your brush even larger to get like larger particles, or you can go smaller, you know, to really get some smaller particles in there too. Either way you want to do it. Okay. Now, if anything's making something like darker, like in this case, we have some dark areas over there, it really shouldn't look like that. It should make everything lighter. So we're going to change this from normal down here to screen. And that's just going to keep anything from looking darker, because these are supposed to be like in the air, right? Okay, so we have our Ash brush. I'm going to put a layer mask on this, and let's just paint with a regular brush now. Black, you know, 10 or 20, 30% flow, just to kind of like fade some of these out where we don't necessarily want as much of them. And it's generally a good idea to do this sort of thing like in layers, you know, where you have like a few different layers. There we go. So that's one layer of Ash. Let's just do another one. Why not? This one, instead, I'm going to use the same brush right over here, but instead of using a just colors, I'm going to grab a curves adjustment layer, and we're going to go to just crank this up, and then we'll put a bit more red, and I'm going to pull down my blues to put more yellow in there as well. I'm going to hit Command I on this to invert the layer mask. And then here we're just going to use the Ash brush to paint white on my layer mask. So this time it's going to actually work with the existing like colors and things like that are in the image. There we go. So it shouldn't be anything that looks like, you know, things shouldn't be as out of place at all, because it's just making what you currently see brighter and more orange in effect. And that's a really good strategy, because it, you know, it's just making everything like more like this basically. So it's good because it's always gonna look real, or, you know, it's always gonna blend in pretty well anyway. There we go. All right, so you can see how like in a couple different steps, we're really able to make that, you know, the fire and everything like that quite a bit nicer. Let's just grab a curves adjustment layer, click here and bring this a little bit brighter, hit Command I on that, and there we go. Let's close this out. And I'm just going to paint white right in there. It's just going to bring a little bit more brightness to the hand there. Cool. All right, so something like that looks really, really good. And There we go. So that's pretty much, well, that's most of the fire. We're gonna come back on it in just a little bit. Now the next thing I want to do, we're just gonna switch gears a little bit. I'm gonna hit Shift Option Command N to create a new layer, and Shift Option Command E to create a stamp visible layer. Okay, so a stamp visible layer is basically just a copy of everything you see. Looks like that. It's on a new layer. Pretty cool. Now I'm gonna change this from normal down here to screen, and I'm gonna hit Command T, and we're gonna make this like really small, because I want to put this fire inside of his eyeball. There we go, because it's supposed to be reflecting, right? So his eye has a reflection already in it. There we go. This is like the subtle details, but I think this is the fun stuff. All right, so something like that. Let's put a Gaussian blur. So we'll go to Filter, Blur, and here to Gaussian blur. Just like a very small amount of blur. There we go. And we'll put a layer mask on there and just paint black on the layer mask. All right. I just like doing stuff like this because I feel like most people don't do stuff like this. They'll just like, you know, be like, whatever. And if you do things like this, sometimes it can just help your image stand out just a little bit more. You know, from out here you can't really tell, except that it's a little bigger, but still looks cool. The fire in his eye. I'm gonna hit Command J, and then we're just gonna move this. So V for the move tool, and just move that, and put that in his other eye there. Cool. Shift click those and hit Command G, double click and call this eyes. All right, and eyes can go inside of my finish group. Why not? So open up the finish group and then put eyes in there as well. All right, we'll just group these and we'll just double click and call this sparks. So I don't really do a whole lot of naming on my layers, but I do, you know, I do like to name my groups and things like that. So it just makes it a little bit easier sometimes to navigate what you're doing. Okay, well that looks really cool. The next thing I want to do is we're gonna go ahead and add a little bit of blue coming from the right side, and let's just create a new layer. The reason I want to do this is because we have this like blue here on the image anyway, and it's having some of that color kind of come in from the right side is going to balance it out. You know, warm and cool colors really work well together, so bringing in some of the cool is just going to help balance that out. So I'm going to hit G for the gradient tool and click here up at the top. We're going to go to the foreground to transparent option here. So not the first option, but the second one in, it's going to be foreground to transparent. So hit OK. And we're going to click on our radial gradient, so you can choose what type of shape you want. We're going to click on radial, and then I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, and there we go. Just sample a color that's here already in the image, so I'm not kind of guessing on that. And just click right there from like right and come here to the left. All right, maybe let's make this a little bit darker, more saturated. Oops. Apparently you can just grab that. I'm gonna zoom out and just kind of like see what we're doing here, because I want this to be subtle. Yeah, something like that is nice. You know, just keep it subtle. Maybe just lower the opacity down a little bit. It's just an idea that this isn't gonna be a little bit cool in this image as well. So it's not only warm, there's gonna be a little bit of cool as well. That's just kind of what we're working on with that idea. Okay, the next thing I'm gonna do, let's grab a curves adjustment layer. I'm just gonna click this and bring it down a little bit. Hit Command I on that for the layer mask to go black. And now we're going to make a white paintbrush, and I'm just gonna paint white like down here in this area. I'm gonna use a flow of about 10% as I do this. And that's just gonna allow me like a really nice like building up effect. There we go. So we're creating a bit of a vignette, but at the same time we're also helping to create like a focal point here on the fire by making the like background areas and things like that just a little bit darker. All right, there we go. It looks really good. Okay, so we have that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to work on his face. So we're going to grab an adjustment layer. I'm going to go up to curves, brighten it up a little bit, grab some red in there, and pull down the blues quite a bit as well. All right, there's really not much blue in there, so adding a little bit of red is just fine. Okay, now what we're going to do is I want this to just show up like on the highlights of his skin. So I need a way to kind of like make it not visible in the shadows, just in the highlights. So to do so, we're going to use blend if. Double click right here on this curves adjustment layer. I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and I'm going to click here on the underlying layer, the underlying layer, and go from the left to the right. There we go, something like that. And what we should get is, somewhere right around here, it should just start to show up on those highlights right here on his face. So let's hit OK, and we'll see what that gives us. Very cool, and that looks good. Now I'm going to hit Command I on this layer mask because I don't want it visible everywhere, but I'm going to paint white visible on his face and over here on like his arm and things like that. So there we go. And what that is basically like an attempt to like bring some of the brightness from the fire back onto his face and again. So it's it's not so much like his face already was light, but it's a little bit lighter, so we're just doing that. And if you want to, you can adjust your brightness. Yeah, something like that looks really good. And the reason why we're only affecting the highlights is because it should be like reflecting this color. So without using this blend if, let me show you what it looks like. It would look like that. Doesn't look nearly as good. So let's hit cancel. So it'll go back. All right, so the blend if is really a pretty big step there. And you can see already here in section 4, we've done quite a bit to this image, which is really cool. All right, and we could probably add more sparks and things like that if we wanted to do that, but I think it's looking pretty good. The next thing that we want to do is I actually want to do a blur in some of these areas because it's going to help. It's going to help like make the fire just kind of like blend in and look a little bit more realistic. So to do so, I'm going to create a new layer. Shift Option Command N, and then Shift Option Command E. It's going to make a new layer. Now we're going to go to Filter and Blur, and I'm going to go over here to Field Blur. Now this is new to like CS6 and CC. If you guys are using CS5, unfortunately you don't have this blur. I apologize, but this is for what we're about to do. This really is the best option here. So I guess upgrade if you can, or you could use Gaussian blurs, or you know what? If you're not using this, I would use the blur tool, which is right here. Just make it super large. But the field blur really is a pretty good blur. There we go. So the field blur, here's how this works. Basically, you click on this center guy so you can move it around, and here you can adjust the amount of blur that you have on your image, and you can kind of like drag that up or down. So let's drag one over there, right over here. So we want a lot of blur there. You just click here and say that, you know what, I don't want any blur to be here. 0. Cool. Click up there and I'll say, yeah, I want some blur right there, but click here and say, I don't want any blur right there. And this is a lot of fun because it is, you can then move these things around and kind of like see where they affect the image. And so this is like, just some of this like fire and stuff like that. I kind of want it to blur out like that because heat sometimes will actually create blurs like that. So it's just kind of like a natural effect that heat does anyway. And there we go. That's why I wanted it to be in this image too. All right, we can go ahead and blur out these back areas too. All right, something like that. And we're gonna hit OK. And you can just really kind of have fun with this. Do it, however much you want. Maybe a little bit less of a blur there. And hit OK. And it should just apply it to this image. All right, so let's zoom out and let's just see the before and after with that real quick. So you can kind of just tell it adds a little bit of, especially around here, it should help us focus directly onto our subject just a little bit better, which is very cool. All right, cool. We're almost done with this. I'm gonna grab a curves adjustment layer. Let's just make this area just a little bit brighter over here. I know we've done that a couple times already, but I'm gonna continue to do so. All right. There we go, and let's just make another curves to make a little bit darker. And I'm gonna hit Command I on the layer mask and then paint this back visible there as well. So this blue, it's subtle, but it is still there. All right, that looks really good too. Okay, Very cool. And the last couple things we're going to do, let's go ahead and add some sharpening to this image. So I'm going to hit Shift Option Command N for a new layer. Shift Option Command E will make us a stamp visible layer. And then I'm going to hit Shift Command U to desaturate that layer. So this is what the image looks like desaturated. It's actually kind of interesting looking. It's kind of weird. What we're going to do here is I'm going to go to Filter, Other, and here to High Pass. There we go. And this is just going to help extract some of the detail out, so I can use this to like sharpen up a little bit. And let's hit OK. Now I can change this from a normal blending mode over here to overlay, and you can see it's just going to sharpen things up. Zoom in a little bit. You can even change it to something like linear light. It's going to really sharpen things up. So if you do something like linear light, it's okay. I would just put a layer mask on it. So I'm going to hit my layer mask button and hold Alt or Option as I click on my layer mask. And then that's going to make a black layer mask. So I'm going to paint this visible like on his, face and things like that. But not let this be visible everywhere. It doesn't really look good on the fire. It really only does it on his face. Let's just change our opacity there a little bit. All right. There we go. So now we know what to look at. Look at right into his face. Very cool. All right. Well, usually at this stage, I'll just like zoom out and kind of like look and see if, there's anything else that I want to change about the image, or anything else that I think needs to be done. There's that finishing stage. Yeah, maybe just if linear light is too strong, change it to something like overlay or soft light. It's just going to give a different effect. It'll still sharpen. It's just going to be a little bit less strong. And in this case, I think we could benefit from a little bit of a less strong effect there. So I'm totally cool with that. All right, let's add a little bit of color toning. I don't know if it's going to look good or not, but I'm always willing to try it out. Let's go over here, our blue channel, and we'll pull a little bit of blues into our shadows, and then yellows into our highlights, which we already have quite a bit of yellows in the highlights. So let's see how that looks. Just a little bit of blue in there. Should play off pretty well with the blue that's already in this, as well as the yellow and the red. Yeah, I think that actually looks really good. Let's lower the opacity a little bit so it's not quite so strong. But I think a little bit of blue in there does wind up helping out with the image as overall. And yeah, that's really about it. Yeah, I wish it were more complex, but I also don't, because sometimes it's just better to not to not be complex. So let's go over what we've done so far. Here in the beginning, so this is the before. We went ahead and cleaned up the background in a couple different layers. We retouched his skin, we added the fire, and then we did quite a bit to finish it up. So really quite a bit was done there. Let's just lower the opacity levels a little bit more. Quite a bit was done, and really cool image. And you guys could totally do something like this on your own. It's not it's not anything crazy, and just use the fire that I provided with this. If you don't feel like photographing it, or it's too dangerous or whatever, just use the fire pictures that we provided, and you feel free to use them and do something similar. Go out there and have fun, and really kill it. There's just one last thing. Let me just create another layer here in the finish group. This is still a little bit too dark right up there. All right, there we go. That helps out a bit. Okay, very cool. And there we are. We're done. Thank you so much for picking up this pro tutorial, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it, and get out there, set people's hands on fire in Photoshop. Thanks again, and I'll learn you later. Bye, everyone.